The smoke from the funeral fire twisted up into the desert sky like a prayer searching for answers. Ayanna sat cross-legged on the hard ground, watching the flames consume the last earthly belongings of her husband, Chayton. The other women of the Apache camp had gone back to their duties, but she remained, staring into the dancing orange light. At 60 years old, Ayanna had seen many deaths. She had delivered babies who took their first breath, and she had held the hands of elders who took their last. But losing Chayton felt different. He had been more than her husband. He had been her anchor to this world. Now, without him, she felt herself drifting towards something she couldn't name. The wind picked up, scattering sparks across the rocky ground. That's when it happened. The world around her began to shimmer and fade like looking through water. The familiar sounds of the camp, children laughing, women grinding corn, men sharpening arrows, all became distant echoes. In their place, she saw something else. Darkness was creeping across the land like spilled ink. It moved slowly but steadily, swallowing everything in its path. She saw Apache villages empty and silent. She saw the white settlements abandoned, their windows like dead eyes staring at nothing. And in the center of it all, she saw a tiny figure, a baby girl no more than a few months old, crying in the darkness. The child was caught between two worlds. On one side stood Apache warriors with painted faces and proud hearts. On the other side stood white settlers with their strange clothes and metal tools. The baby reached out to both sides, but neither group stepped forward to help her. As the darkness grew closer, the child's cries grew weaker. But then something changed in the vision. A man and a woman stepped toward the baby from opposite sides. The man had the strong build of an Apache warrior, his long black hair tied with leather. The woman wore the simple dress of a frontier settler, her hands gentle but sure. As they reached for the child together, a bright light pushed back the darkness. Ayanna gasped and found herself back by the dying fire. The vision felt more real than the ground beneath her. She had received many spiritual messages over the years, but none had ever been so clear or urgent. This wasn't just a dream or a wish. It was a warning about something that would happen soon. She was still thinking about what she had seen when she heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, she saw a young Apache warrior walking toward her camp. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone trained from birth to hunt and fight, but his face showed worry and exhaustion. This was Dakota, she realized. She had seen him around the camp but had never spoken to him directly. He was maybe 25 years old with kind eyes and calloused hands. He had lost his wife during childbirth 6 months ago, leaving him to raise his daughter alone. "Grandmother Ayanna," he said, using the respectful title for an elder woman. "I hope I am not disturbing you." "You are not," she replied, studying his face. Something about him seemed familiar, though she was sure they had never met properly. "What brings you to my fire, young warrior?" Dakota shifted his weight from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable. "My daughter Itzel has been sick for 3 days now. She won't eat and her body burns with fever. I have tried everything I know, but nothing helps. The other mothers say you might have medicine that could help her." As soon as he said his daughter's name, everything clicked into place for Ayanna. This was the man from her vision, the Apache warrior who would have to choose between his pride and his child's life. And somewhere out there was a woman who would complete the picture, though Ayanna didn't know who she was yet. "How old is your daughter?" Ayanna asked, though she already knew the answer. 6 months old, Dakota replied. "She is all I have left of her mother." Ayanna nodded slowly. The pieces were falling into place exactly as she had seen them. "Tell me, Dakota, do you believe in visions?" The question clearly surprised him. Yes, grandmother. My people have always listened to the spirit world." "Good," Ayanna said, rising to her feet with some difficulty. Her old bones protested, but her mind was sharp and focused. "Because I have something important to tell you about your daughter's future." She walked to her dwelling and returned with a small leather pouch filled with dried herbs. "This will help with her fever for now," she said, placing it in his hands. "Mix a pinch with warm water and let her drink it 3 times each day." Dakota accepted the medicine gratefully, but Ayanna wasn't finished. She placed her weathered hand on his arm and looked directly into his eyes. "Listen carefully, young warrior. Your daughter's sickness is not just in her body. It is connected to something much larger. I have seen a darkness coming to our land. It will destroy both our people and the white settlers unless something changes." Dakota frowned, not understanding. "What kind of darkness?" The darkness of hatred and separation, Ayana explained. For too long, our people and theirs have chosen to see only differences. We have chosen to fight instead of finding common ground. This hatred feeds on itself and grows stronger each year. She paused, letting her words sink in. The fire had burned down to glowing coals, casting strange shadows on their faces. Your daughter stands at the center of this coming storm, Ayana continued. She represents hope for a different future, one where two worlds can become one family. But this can only happen if you are willing to put aside old ways of thinking. I don't understand, Dakota said, confusion clear in his voice. What does this have to do with Itzel's fever? Ayana took a deep breath. This was the hardest part to explain and the most important. The night is closing in, young warrior. You have until the next new moon, 3 weeks, to make a choice that will save not just your daughter but many others as well. What choice? You must marry someone from the other world, Ayana said simply. A woman who can bridge the gap between Apache and white. Only through this union can your daughter find the strength to survive and grow into the bridge our peoples need. Dakota stared at her in shock. Marry a white woman? That's impossible. Our people would never accept it. Their people would never accept it either. Many things seem impossible until they become necessary, Ayana replied calmly. I have seen this path in a vision sent by the spirits. If you choose differently, your daughter will not see her first birthday. And the darkness I saw will consume us all. The young warrior looked down at the medicine in his hands, then back at Ayana's serious face. How can you be sure this vision is true? Because, Ayana said, I have never been wrong about such things. Not once in 60 years. They stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of her words settling between them. Finally, Dakota nodded slowly. I will think about what you have said, grandmother. Don't think too long, Ayana warned as he turned to leave. Time moves quickly and the new moon waits for no one. As she watched Dakota disappear into the night, Ayana felt both hope and worry in her heart. She had delivered the warning, just as the spirits had shown her. Now it was up to him to find the courage to follow a path that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the world. The last embers of Chaitan's funeral fire flickered and went dark, but Ayana remained by the cold ashes, praying that her words would be enough to change the future she had seen. Dakota walked through the Apache camp as the first rays of morning sun painted the desert mountains gold. In his arms, baby Itzel felt lighter than she should, her tiny body burning with fever despite the medicine Ayana had given him. He had barely slept, watching his daughter toss and turn through the night, her small cries cutting through his heart like arrows. The old woman's words kept echoing in his mind. Marry someone from the other world. It sounded like madness. Apache warriors didn't marry white women. It simply wasn't done. Their people had been fighting the whites for generations, and both sides had spilled too much blood to forget easily. But as he looked down at Itzel's flushed face, Dakota felt his certainty beginning to crack. What if Ayana was right? What if his pride mattered less than his daughter's life? Brother, you look like you haven't slept in days, came a familiar voice behind him. Dakota turned to see his sister Nayeli approaching. She was 2 years younger than him, with the same dark eyes and strong features, but where Dakota often kept his thoughts to himself. Nayeli spoke her mind freely. Itzel is still sick, he said simply, not wanting to explain about his visit to Ayana. Nayeli reached out to touch the baby's forehead and frowned. She's burning up. Have you tried willow bark tea? I've tried everything I know, Dakota replied, exhaustion clear in his voice. Nothing works. His sister studied his face carefully. She had always been able to read him better than anyone else, even when they were children playing by the river. There's something else bothering you, she said. What is it? Dakota hesitated. If he told Nayeli about Ayana's vision, she would either think he was losing his mind or she would take it seriously, and he wasn't sure which outcome. Scared him more. I spoke with grandmother. Ayana last night, he finally admitted. Nayeli's eyes widened. Everyone in the camp knew about Ayana's gift for seeing things that hadn't happened yet. Her predictions had saved their people more times than anyone could count. What did she tell you? Dakota looked around to make sure no one else was listening, then spoke in a low voice. She said Itzel's sickness is connected to something bigger. She said I have to make a difficult choice. To save her. What kind of choice? He couldn't bring himself to say it directly. She said I need to build a bridge between two worlds. Nayeli was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she nodded slowly. Ayana has never been wrong, Dakota. Not about the drought 3 years ago. Not about the cavalry attack last spring, not about anything important. But what she's asking is impossible, Dakota protested. Is it? Nayeli challenged. Or are you just afraid? Her words stung because they contained truth. Dakota was afraid, not of fighting or dying, but of stepping into unknown territory where the old rules didn't apply. As they talked, other people in the camp began their morning activities. Women emerged from their dwellings to tend cooking fires. Men checked their weapons and horses. Children who were healthy ran between the adults, playing games and laughing. But several families had sick children too, Dakota noticed. The same fever, the same weakness. Look around, Nayeli said quietly. Itzel isn't the only one suffering. Maybe whatever Ayana saw affects more than just our family. Dakota hadn't considered that possibility, but it made sense. If some kind of spiritual darkness was coming, as Ayana had warned, it would touch many lives. Even if I wanted to follow her advice, he said, how would I even begin? I don't know any white women, and I can't exactly ride into their settlements asking for a wife. Nayeli tilted her head, considering. What about the trading post at Copper Springs? White people go there, and some of them aren't soldiers or settlers looking for trouble. Maybe there's someone there who would listen. The idea terrified Dakota. Copper Springs was a small frontier town about a day's ride from their camp. He had been there a few times to trade horses and furs, but always with other Apache men and always briefly. The thought of going there alone with his sick daughter, asking for help from strangers. I can't take Itzel on such a long journey while she's this ill, he said. Then leave her with me, Nayeli offered. I'll watch over her while you scout the situation. You don't have to make any decisions today, but at least you could see what options exist. Dakota felt torn in two directions. Everything logical told him to ignore Ayana's vision and focus on traditional Apache healing methods. But everything in his heart told him that time was running short, and traditional methods weren't working. As if sensing his internal struggle, Itzel stirred in his arms and opened her dark eyes. She looked up at him with complete trust, expecting him to protect her and make everything better. That look decided it for him. I'll go tomorrow, he said, but I'm taking her with me. I won't leave her side while she's sick. That's dangerous, Nayeli warned. Everything is dangerous now, Dakota replied. The question is which danger gives her the best chance of surviving. They spent the rest of the day preparing for the journey. Nayeli gathered supplies and helped Dakota fashion a comfortable carrier for Itzel that would keep her safe during the ride. Other people in the camp noticed the preparations, but Dakota kept his explanations vague. He said he was seeking a different kind of medicine, which was true enough. That evening, as he sat by his small fire giving Itzel another dose of Ayana's herbs, the old woman appeared beside him as silently as smoke. You have decided to act, she observed, settling down across from him. I have decided to explore possibilities, Dakota corrected. That's not the same thing, Ayana smiled. Sometimes the first step toward wisdom is admitting you don't have all the answers. Tell me more about this vision, Dakota requested. What exactly did you see? The old woman stared into the fire for a long moment before speaking. I saw a child caught between two worlds with darkness closing in from all sides. I saw people choosing hate over hope, fear over understanding, but I also saw light pushing back the darkness when two unlikely people chose love over prejudice. You really think a marriage could change all that? Not just any marriage, Ayana clarified. A marriage built on mutual respect and shared purpose. A union that shows both peoples that cooperation is stronger than conflict. Dakota looked down at Itzel, who had fallen asleep in his arms. Her fever seemed a little lower tonight, but she was still far from healthy. What if I go to Copper Springs and find no one willing to help? Then you will have learned something important, Ayana replied. But I don't think that will happen. The spirits have already set events in motion. You just need to be brave enough to see them through. As she rose to leave, she placed a small object in Dakota's hand. It was a piece of turquoise carved into the shape of a bird in flight. This was my grandmother's, she said. It represents the soul's journey from one world to another. Keep it with you and remember that change often looks like loss before it reveals itself as growth. After she was gone, Dakota sat holding his daughter and the turquoise bird, watching the stars appear in the desert sky. Tomorrow he would begin a journey that might save Itzel's life, or might destroy everything he thought he knew about himself. But looking at his daughter's peaceful face, he knew he had to try. Love sometimes demanded impossible things, and parents had no choice but to find ways to make the impossible possible. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Somewhere out there was a future he couldn't imagine, but maybe that was exactly what Itzel needed. Something beyond imagination, something that could only be reached by stepping into the unknown with faith as his guide. Dr. Elena Rodriguez pulled her horse to a stop on the ridge overlooking Copper Springs. The small frontier town spread out below her like a collection of wooden boxes scattered across the desert floor. After 2 weeks of travel from El Paso, she was dusty, tired, and ready to begin the new chapter of her life. At 32, Elena had already lived through more loss than many people twice her age. Her husband, Miguel, had died of cholera 2 years ago, leaving her alone in a world that didn't quite know what to do with a woman who practiced medicine. She had trained alongside Miguel, learning from books he brought back from medical school in Mexico City. But most people still found it strange to see a woman carrying a doctor's bag. Copper Springs represented a fresh start. The town needed a doctor, and Elena needed a place where her past didn't follow her like a shadow. She urged her horse down the slope, her medical supplies packed carefully in the saddlebags behind her. The main street was busier than she had expected. Cowboys, shopkeepers, and travelers moved between the buildings with purpose. A few women in long dresses swept dust from storefronts, and children played in the spaces between wagons. It looked like a place where people worked hard and asked few questions about where newcomers came from. Elena guided her horse toward the building that would serve as both her home and her clinic. It was a simple wooden structure with large windows that would provide good light for examining patients. She had purchased it sight unseen through letters with the town's previous doctor, who had decided to return east to be closer to his grandchildren. As she dismounted and began unloading her supplies, a commotion erupted at the far end of the street. People were pointing and talking in hushed voices. Elena looked up to see what had captured their attention and felt her breath catch in her throat. An Apache warrior sat mounted on a paint horse, holding what appeared to be a very sick baby. His long black hair was tied back with leather, and his clothes marked him clearly as someone from one of the local tribes. But what struck Elena most was the expression on his face, not defiance or anger, but desperate worry. The townspeople were keeping their distance, some reaching for weapons, others simply staring. Elena had heard stories about conflicts between Apache and settlers. But looking at this man holding his child, all she saw was a father in need of help. Without thinking, she walked toward him, her medical bag in hand. The crowd parted reluctantly, muttering warnings. "That's not wise, Doc," called out Pete Morrison, who ran the general store. "Apaches can't be trusted." Elena ignored the comment and stopped a few feet from the warrior's horse. Up close, she could see that the baby in his arms was burning with fever, her small body limp and unresponsive. "Your daughter is very sick," Elena said in Spanish, hoping he might understand that language better than English. The Apache man looked surprised, then replied in accented but clear English. "You are a doctor?" "Yes," Elena answered. "My name is Elena Rodriguez. I just arrived to open a practice here." The warrior studied her face for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to trust her. Finally he spoke. "I am Dakota. This is my daughter Itzel. She has been sick for days and nothing helps." Elena could see the exhaustion in his eyes and the way he held his daughter protectively against his chest. Every instinct she had developed as a healer told her this child needed immediate attention. "May I examine her?" Elena asked gently. Dakota hesitated, then slowly dismounted, still holding Itzel carefully. The crowd around them grew larger and more restless. Elena could hear whispered conversations about savage Apache and foolish woman doctor. But when Elena reached out to touch the baby's forehead, something remarkable happened. Itzel opened her eyes and looked directly at Elena, as if recognizing something familiar. The baby's fever was dangerously high, but Elena had seen these symptoms before. "She needs to get out of this heat," Elena said firmly. "Bring her into my clinic." "You can't bring him in there," protested Mrs. Campbell, the mayor's wife. "What will people think?" Elena turned to face the growing crowd of onlookers. "They will think that I am a doctor, and this child is my patient. That's all that matters." She led Dakota toward her clinic, ignoring the angry murmurs behind them. Once inside, Elena quickly lit lamps and prepared her examination area. The building still smelled like fresh wood and new paint, but it had everything she needed. As she carefully examined Itzel, Elena's suspicions were confirmed. The baby had a rare blood condition that could be treated with the right medicine, but it required ongoing care and attention. Left untreated, it would be fatal within weeks. Your daughter has a sickness in her blood, Elena explained to Dakota. It's not caused by evil spirits or bad water. It's something she was born with, but it can be controlled with medicine. Dakota listened intently as Elena described the treatment Itzel would need. It involved special medicines that had to be given regularly, a careful diet, and close monitoring of her symptoms. How do you know about this sickness? Dakota asked. I treated another child with the same condition when I lived in El Paso, Elena replied. A little boy who was dying until we figured out what was wrong. And he lived? He lived and grew strong, Elena assured him. But it took time and patience. As she spoke, Elena prepared a dose of medicine that would help reduce Itzel's fever immediately. The baby took it without protest, as if she understood that this strange woman was trying to help her. That night, Elena had a dream unlike any she had experienced before. She was standing in a vast desert under a starless sky, and an elderly Apache woman approached her from the darkness. The woman's face was kind but serious, marked with the wisdom that comes from a long life. You are the one, the old woman said in the dream, the bridge between worlds that my vision showed me. I don't understand, Elena replied. You will, the woman answered. The child you treated today is the key to saving many others. But she cannot walk this path alone, and neither can her father. They need someone who belongs to both worlds, someone who can see past the fear and hatred that blinds others. Elena woke with the woman's words echoing in her mind. She had never believed in prophetic dreams, but something about this one felt different, more real than reality itself. The next morning, Dakota returned to check on Itzel's progress. The baby's fever had broken during the night, and she was eating again for the first time in days. Elena felt a surge of professional satisfaction, but also something deeper, a sense that this case was more important than she initially realized. The medicine is working, she told Dakota, but Itzel will need regular treatments. I would recommend bringing her back every few days, at least until we're sure the condition is stable. Dakota nodded, but Elena could see conflict in his expression. My people live far from this town. The journey is difficult, especially with a sick child. Elena had been thinking about this problem since the previous evening. The logical solution was obvious, but it would require both of them to be brave. There's another option, she said carefully. You could stay in Copper Springs. I have extra room in the back of the clinic. You could help me with other patients while Itzel receives treatment. The suggestion surprised both of them. Elena hadn't planned to offer such a thing, but the words came out naturally as if someone else was speaking through her. Dakota stared at her in amazement. You would trust an Apache to live in your home? I would trust a father who loves his daughter to do whatever is necessary to keep her healthy, Elena replied. Outside, they could hear the sounds of the town waking up. Horses, voices, the creak of wagon wheels. It was a world that might not accept what Elena was proposing, but as she looked at Itzel's improving condition, she knew it was the right thing to do. I need time to think, Dakota said finally. Of course, Elena agreed, but don't take too long. Itzel's health depends on consistent treatment. As Dakota prepared to leave with his daughter, he turned back to Elena with a question that surprised her. Why are you helping us? Your people and mine are not friends. Elena thought about her answer carefully. Because, she said finally, I believe healing is more important than hatred. And because your daughter deserves a chance to grow up in a world where people help each other, instead of hurting each other. That evening, Elena sat in her clinic writing notes about Itzel's condition and thinking about the strange dream she had experienced. She didn't know what forces were at work in her life, but she felt certain that meeting Dakota and his daughter was no accident. Outside her window, the desert stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, and Elena found herself hoping that tomorrow would bring answers to questions she was just beginning to understand. 3 days had passed since Elena first treated baby Itzel, and the town of Copper Springs was buzzing with gossip about the lady doctor who welcomed Apache visitors to her clinic. Some people admired her courage, while others questioned her judgment. But Elena focused on what mattered most. Itzel was getting stronger every day. Dakota had been bringing his daughter for daily treatments, arriving early in the morning when fewer people were around. Elena noticed how he studied everything in her clinic with quiet intelligence, asking thoughtful questions about the medicines and tools she used. Despite the language barriers and cultural differences, they were developing an easy working relationship based on their shared concern for Itzel. On this particular morning, Elena was teaching Dakota how to prepare one of Itzel's medicines when the sound of gunshots echoed through the town. Both of them froze, listening as shouts and running footsteps filled the street outside. "Stay here with Itzel," Elena said, moving toward the window to see what was happening. What she saw made her blood run cold. A supply wagon lay overturned. On the main street, its contents scattered across the ground. 2 men lay motionless beside it, and several others were shouting about Apache raiders. Someone was organizing a group of armed men, their faces twisted with anger and fear. Elena turned back to find Dakota standing rigid, his jaw clenched. He had heard enough to understand what was happening. "My cousin," he said quietly. "Nalnish leads the young warriors who still believe fighting is the only answer." "Were you involved in this?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer from his expression. "No," Dakota replied firmly. "I told you, I came here seeking healing for my daughter, not war. But others in my tribe think differently." Before Elena could respond, heavy footsteps approached her clinic. The door burst open without warning, and Mayor Campbell entered with 3 other men, all carrying rifles. Elena recognized Pete Morrison from the general store and Doc Whitman, the elderly veterinarian who had been filling in for medical emergencies. "There's been an attack, Doc," Mayor Campbell announced, his eyes fixed suspiciously on Dakota. "2 good men are dead, and we know Apaches did it." "That's terrible news," Elena replied, stepping slightly in front of Dakota and Itzel. "But this man had nothing to do with any attack. He's been here with his sick daughter." Pete Morrison spat tobacco juice into a brass cup. "All Apaches are the same, Doc. You can't trust any of them." "That's not true," Elena said firmly. "This father is trying to save his child's life. He poses no threat to anyone." "How do we know he's not a scout for the raiders?" Doc Whitman demanded. "How do we know this whole sick baby story isn't just a trick to get inside our defenses?" Elena felt her temper rising. "Because I'm a doctor, and I know the difference between a genuinely sick child and a healthy one being used as a prop. Itzel has a serious medical condition that could have killed her without treatment." Mayor Campbell looked back and forth between Elena and Dakota, clearly trying to decide what to do. "I'm sorry, Doc, but we can't take any chances. The Apache needs to leave town immediately. That could kill his daughter," Elena protested. "She needs daily medication and monitoring. If you force them to leave now, you'll be condemning an innocent baby to death." "Better one Apache baby than more dead settlers," Pete Morrison said coldly. The casual way he dismissed Itzel's life made Elena's hands shake with anger. "Get out of my clinic," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "All of you. This is a place of healing, not hatred." "Now see here, Doc," Mayor Campbell began. "No, you. See here?" Elena interrupted, her professional authority taking over. "I took an oath to heal the sick regardless of their race or background. That baby is my patient, and I won't abandon her because you're afraid of shadows." The men exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with Elena's defiance but unsure how to respond. Finally, Mayor Campbell spoke again. "You're new here, Doc, so maybe you don't understand how things work on the frontier. We've got to protect our own people first." "Protecting people doesn't require killing innocent children," Elena replied. As the tension in the room grew thicker, Dakota finally spoke. "I will leave," he said quietly. "I don't want to bring trouble to your town." "No," Elena said immediately. "Your daughter needs medical care. I won't let fear and prejudice prevent me from treating a sick child." Dakota looked at her with surprise and something that might have been gratitude. "You would risk your position here for us?" "I would risk anything to do what's right," Elena replied honestly. Mayor Campbell shook his head in frustration. "Doc, you're making a mistake. The townspeople won't stand for this. You'll lose their trust and their business." Then that's their choice, Elena said. But it won't change mine. After the men left, muttering threats and predictions of disaster, Elena and Dakota worked together in tense silence. Itzel seemed unaware of the drama surrounding her, playing happily with a wooden rattle Elena had given her. "Why are you doing this?" Dakota asked eventually. "These people are your neighbors. I am a stranger." Elena considered her answer carefully. "When I was a child, my family fled Mexico during a time of great violence. We were strangers in a new place, and most people treated us with suspicion. But one doctor in El Paso took a chance on us. He taught me that healing knows no borders, and that compassion is stronger than fear." She paused, watching Itzel grab at the rattle with determined tiny fingers. "Besides, I had a dream the other night. An old Apache woman spoke to me about bridges between worlds. I think maybe this is what she meant." Dakota's eyes widened. "You dreamed of an Apache elder?" "Yes." She seemed very wise and very concerned about something she called the darkness closing in. "Ayanna," Dakota whispered. "That sounds like something she would say." "You know her?" "She is the one who told me to bring Itzel to find healing," Dakota explained. "She sees things that haven't happened yet. If she appeared in your dreams, it means the spirits are guiding both of us toward something important." Before Elena could respond, they heard more commotion in the street. This time it sounded different, not angry shouts, but organized movement. Elena looked out the window to see a group of Apache warriors riding slowly down the main street. At their head was a young man with fierce eyes and war paint on his face. "Nal Nish," Dakota said grimly. "He's coming for me." "What does he want?" "To drag me back to the tribe before I bring shame on our people by associating with whites," Dakota replied. "Or worse, he might want to use me as a hostage to trade for safe passage out of town." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The situation was spiraling out of control, and Itzel was caught in the middle of it all. She could see townspeople gathering with weapons while the Apache warriors formed a defensive line in the street. "There has to be a way to prevent bloodshed," Elena said desperately. Dakota looked at his daughter, then at Elena. "Maybe there is," he said slowly. "But it would require both of us to be very brave." "What do you mean?" "Ayanna told me that the only way to save Itzel was to build a bridge between our worlds. I thought she meant I should find a white woman to marry, but maybe she meant something different." Elena felt her heart skip a beat. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe the bridge isn't about marriage at all. Maybe it's about two people from different worlds standing together and refusing to let hatred win." Outside, the tension was building toward violence. Elena could see Mayor Campbell trying to organize the townspeople, while Nalnish spoke angrily to his warriors in Apache. It would only take one wrong move, one frightened person pulling a trigger, to turn the street into a battlefield. "If we go out there together," Elena said, "they might kill both of us." "Yes," Dakota agreed. "But if we don't, they'll definitely kill each other. And Itzel will grow up in a world where her mixed heritage makes her an enemy to everyone." Elena looked down at the baby in Dakota's arms. Itzel had fallen asleep, her breathing steady and peaceful. She trusted the adults around her to keep her safe, not knowing that the entire world seemed determined to tear itself apart. "Ayanna was right about one thing," Elena said finally. "Sometimes the only way to push back darkness is to step into the light even when it's dangerous." Dakota nodded. "Together?" "Together," Elena agreed. They walked toward the door, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything for all of them. Outside, two worlds prepared for war, but inside the clinic, two people who had found something worth fighting for prepared to make their stand. Elena and Dakota stepped out of the clinic into a scene that looked like the beginning of a war. 20 Apache warriors sat mounted in the dusty street, their faces painted with red and black stripes that meant they were ready for battle. Facing them, an equal number of townspeople crouched behind wagons and building corners, rifles pointed and fingers on triggers. In the center of it all stood Nalnish, Dakota's cousin. He was younger than Dakota, maybe 22 years old, but his eyes held the cold fury of someone who had seen too much violence. When he spotted Dakota holding Itzel, His expression grew even harder. "Cousin," Nalnish called out in Apache, his voice carrying clearly across the tense silence. "You shame our ancestors by begging for help from those who killed our brothers." Elena didn't understand the words, but she could feel their meaning. Takota's jaw tightened, and he replied in the same language, his tone firm but respectful. "I do not beg," Takota said. "I seek healing for my daughter as any father would, from our enemies." Nalnish spat. "Have you forgotten the blood they have spilled? The promises they have broken?" Mayor Campbell stepped forward from behind an overturned wagon. "We don't want trouble," he called out, though his rifle remained ready. "Take your people and leave peacefully, and no one needs to get hurt." Nalnish turned his attention to the mayor with a mocking smile. "Peaceful? Like the peace your soldiers brought to our village last winter? Like the peace your traitors promised before they cheated us?" Elena could see the situation getting worse by the moment. Angry murmurs rose from both sides, and several weapons were being raised higher. She knew that once the shooting started, it wouldn't stop until many people were dead, possibly including Itzel, who slept peacefully in her father's arms, unaware of the danger surrounding her. "Stop," Elena said loudly, stepping forward into the space between the two groups. "Please, all of you, just stop." Every eye turned to her. She felt exposed and terrified, but she forced herself to keep walking until she stood directly between the Apache warriors and the armed townspeople. "This doesn't have to end in bloodshed," she continued, her voice carrying in the still air. "We're all here because we care about protecting our families. That makes us the same, not different." "Pretty words," Nalnish replied in English, his accent thick but understandable. "But words don't bring back the dead." "No," Elena agreed. "But more killing won't bring them back either. It will just create more widows, more orphans, more reasons for hatred." She turned to face the townspeople. "This man," she said, gesturing to Takota, "brought his dying daughter to me for help. Not as a warrior, not as an enemy, but as a father. I've spent 3 days treating that child, and I've seen nothing but love and devotion from him." Mayor Campbell frowned. "That doesn't change what his people did to our supply wagon, and what your people have done to Apache villages," Elena countered. "How far back should we go? How many generations of revenge do we need before someone decides to break the cycle?" The crowd murmured uneasily. Elena could see some faces softening with consideration, while others remained hard with anger and fear. Takota stepped up beside Elena, still holding Itzel. "My cousin speaks from pain," he said, addressing both groups. "We have all lost people we loved, but my daughter is innocent of those crimes, just as the children in your town are innocent." Nalnish's horse pranced restlessly, sensing its rider's agitation. "You speak of innocence while standing with those who would destroy us all." "I stand with someone who saved my daughter's life," Takota replied firmly. "And I believe there must be a better way forward than endless war." Elena felt something click into place in her mind, the same feeling she had experienced in her dream with the Apache elder. This was the moment Ayanna had foreseen, the choice that would determine whether darkness or light prevailed. "There is a better way," Elena said suddenly, her voice stronger than before. "But it requires all of us to be braver than we've ever been." She turned to face Takota directly. "You said Ayanna told you to build a bridge between worlds. What if that's exactly what we do?" Takota's eyes widened as he realized what she was suggesting. "Elena." "I know it sounds impossible," she continued, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "But what if we showed both our peoples that cooperation is stronger than conflict? What if we proved that two people from different worlds can create something better together than either could achieve alone?" The crowd fell completely silent. Even the horses seemed to sense that something momentous was happening. "Are you proposing what I think you're proposing?" Mayor Campbell asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. "I'm proposing that Takota and I get married," she said clearly. "Not for love, not yet, but as a symbol that our peoples can choose unity over division." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Angry shouts erupted from both sides. Some townspeople called Elena crazy or treasonous. Several Apache warriors reached for their weapons, and Nalnish's face went purple with rage. "You would marry this white woman?" he demanded of Takota in Apache. "You would pollute our bloodline and dishonor our ancestors?" But before Takota could answer, another voice cut through the chaos. It was old Pete Morrison stepping out from behind his cover with his rifle lowered. "Wait just a minute," he said gruffly. Doc Rodriguez has been nothing but helpful since she got here. And that Apache fellow, well, I've watched him with his baby. Never seen a man more devoted to his child. His unexpected support seemed to give others permission to think rather than just react. Elena saw several faces in the crowd showing uncertainty instead of pure anger. It could work, said Mrs. Henderson, the schoolteacher. I mean, if they're both committed to peace, but it's madness, Mayor Campbell protested. The territorial government would never approve. The territorial government isn't here, Elena pointed out. We are, and we have to decide what kind of community we want to be. Dakota shifted itself to one arm and reached out to take Elena's hand. If you're serious about this, he said quietly, you should know that it won't be easy. Both our peoples will see us as traitors at first. Elena squeezed his fingers. I know, but Itzel deserves a chance to grow up somewhere better than this. As if hearing her name, the baby opened her eyes and looked around at all the adults staring at her. She seemed completely unafraid, reaching out toward the crowd with tiny, curious fingers. That simple gesture seemed to diffuse some of the tension. Several people on both sides lowered their weapons slightly. Nalnish, however, remained furious. If you go through with this betrayal, he warned Dakota, you will no longer be welcome among our people. You will be dead to us. Then I will build a new people, Dakota replied steadily. One where children like Itzel can belong to both worlds without having to choose. Elena felt tears in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. For the first time since arriving in Copper Springs, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Father Miguel at the old mission might perform the ceremony, she said. He's married couples from different backgrounds before. And there are Apache traditions that must be observed as well, Dakota added. If we're truly building a bridge, we need to honor both sides. The crowd was beginning to break up as people processed what they had witnessed. Some left shaking their heads in disgust while others lingered to whisper among themselves. The Apache warriors were also dividing into groups, some riding away with Nalnish while others remained to speak quietly with Dakota. As the immediate crisis passed, Elena realized that the easy part was over. Now came the real challenge, turning a desperate proposal made in the heat of crisis into something real and lasting. Are you sure about this? Dakota asked her privately as the street finally began to clear. Elena looked at Itzel, who had fallen asleep again, completely trusting in the adults who held her future in their hands. I'm sure that doing nothing will solve nothing, she replied. And I'm sure that little girl deserves every chance we can give her. Dakota nodded slowly. Then let's build that bridge. The hidden canyon was a place of ancient peace, where red stone walls rose like cathedral spires, and a small spring fed hardy desert plants that had grown here for centuries. Ayanna had chosen this location carefully, knowing it held spiritual significance for her, people while remaining far enough from both the Apache camp and Copper Springs to avoid unwanted visitors. Elena had never imagined her wedding would take place in such a remote location, with such unusual circumstances. 3 days had passed since her public proposal to Dakota, and the reactions from both communities had been exactly as difficult as expected. Half the townspeople thought she had lost her mind, while the other half grudgingly admitted she might be onto something. The Apache were similarly divided, with many viewing Dakota's choice as betrayal, while others saw it as a brave step toward a different future. But here in the canyon, surrounded by only a few trusted friends and family members, Elena felt strangely at peace. She wore a simple white dress that had belonged to her mother, modified with turquoise beading that Nayeli, Dakota's sister, had sewn on by hand. Dakota stood beside her in traditional Apache clothing, but with a silver cross that Elena had given him hanging around his neck, a symbol that he honored both worlds. Ayanna moved slowly around them, burning sage and speaking in the old language. Elena couldn't understand the words, but she felt their power. This was clearly a sacred ritual that connected them not just to each other, but to generations of Apache who had celebrated life and love in this same landscape. Father Miguel waited nearby, the elderly Mexican priest who had agreed to perform the Christian portion of the ceremony. He was a small man with kind eyes who had spent 40 years ministering to people along the border, learning that faith came in many forms and spoke many languages. The spirits of this place welcome you both, Ayanna said in English, completing the first part of the Apache ritual. They see your hearts and know that you come here not from passion alone, but from the deeper love that seeks to heal the wounds between peoples. As she spoke, little Itzel gurgled happily in Naili's arms. The baby had continued to improve under Elena's care, growing stronger each day. Her recovery was proof that the marriage wasn't just symbolic. It was already producing real healing. Now we will speak the vows that bind you to each other, Ayana continued. But first you must understand what you are truly promising, she turned to Elena. You take as your husband not just this man, but his history, his people's struggles, their hopes for the future. Can you carry that weight with honor? Elena looked into Takota's dark eyes and saw the vulnerability there. He was trusting her with more than his own heart. He was trusting her with his daughter's future and his people's dreams of peace. I can and I will, Elena replied firmly. Ayana nodded and turned to Takota. You take as your wife not just this woman, but her dreams of healing, her commitment to serving others regardless of their background. Can you support that calling even when it brings hardship? Takota thought of all the times he had watched Elena work with Itzel, how she had risked her position in the community to help them, how she had stepped between two armed groups to prevent bloodshed. I can and I will, he answered. As Ayana prepared to continue the ceremony, the sound of approaching horses echoed off the canyon walls. Elena's heart sank as she recognized the angry voices. Nalnish had found them. A dozen Apache warriors rode into the canyon, their faces painted for war. Behind them came an equal number of armed townspeople, led by Mayor Campbell and Pete Morrison. Both groups looked ready for a fight, and Elena realized that their secret ceremony was about to become the flashpoint for exactly the kind of violence they had hoped to prevent. Stop this madness immediately, Mayor Campbell shouted, his rifle pointed in Takota's general direction. This union is illegal and unnatural. It is an abomination, Nalnish agreed, speaking in English so everyone could understand. Takota has dishonored our ancestors and corrupted our bloodline. Ayana stepped forward, placing herself between the angry groups and the wedding party. Despite her advanced age, her presence commanded immediate respect. You come armed to a place of peace, she said, her voice carrying surprising strength. You bring hatred to a ceremony of love. Why? Because this marriage will destroy both our peoples, Nalnish replied. It will make us weak, confused about who we are. On the contrary, Father Miguel spoke up unexpectedly, his gentle voice somehow audible over the tension. I have seen many marriages between different cultures in my years serving along the border. The children of such unions often become bridges between communities, helping heal old wounds. Pretty words from someone who doesn't have to live with the consequences, Pete Morrison grumbled. But as he spoke, baby Itzel began to cry. The sound cut through all the adult arguments like a knife. Elena instinctively moved toward Nayeli to comfort the child, and Takota followed. In that moment, everyone present could see what mattered most. Not politics or prejudice, but the welfare of an innocent baby who needed protection and love. Look at her, Elena said, taking Itzel into her arms. Really look at her. She's part Apache and she's been saved by frontier medicine. She represents what we could all become if we stopped being afraid of each other. Itzel stopped crying as soon as Elena held her, reaching up to touch Elena's face with tiny fingers. The simple trust between them was visible to everyone in the canyon. This child has been dying, Ayana said, addressing both groups. The sickness in her blood would have killed her within days if these two people had not worked together to heal her. Now look, she is healthy, strong, growing. Several people in both groups lowered their weapons slightly, affected by the baby's obvious well-being. But it's more than one child, Ayana continued. I have seen other children in both communities developing the same sickness. The medicine woman's herbs cannot cure it alone, and the white doctor's knowledge is not complete without understanding our healing traditions. They need each other. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Other children are getting sick? 3 Apache babies and 2 settler children that I know of, Ayana confirmed. All with the same blood sickness that nearly killed this little one. The revelation changed everything. Suddenly, this wasn't about politics or cultural pride. It was about saving children's lives. Dr. Whitman, who had come with the townspeople, stepped forward. If that's true, we need to work together. I've been treating 2 children with strange fevers, but nothing I tried helped them. And I know the families of the Apache children, admitted one of Nalnish's warriors. They grow weaker each day. Elena looked around at the faces surrounding them. Apache and settler, young and old, all united now by the shared fear of losing their children. "This is why the spirits brought you together," Ayanna said to Elena and Dakota, "not just to save one baby, but to show the path forward for all our children." Father Miguel stepped forward with his worn Bible. "If there are no more objections, perhaps we should complete this ceremony. It seems these two people have work to do, and they can do it better as a united family than as separate individuals." The objections that had seemed so important moments before now felt petty in the face of children's lives hanging in the balance. Even Nalnish looked uncertain, his anger warring with his concern for the sick Apache babies. "The Apache portion of the ceremony is complete," Ayanna announced. "By our traditions, they are already married. What remains is for their union to be recognized by the white man's law as well." Father Miguel opened his Bible and began the Christian ceremony, his voice gentle but sure. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God and these witnesses to join Elena and Dakota in holy matrimony." As he spoke, Elena felt the strangest sensation, as if she was watching herself from above, seeing how this moment would ripple outward through time. This marriage was just the beginning. Together, she and Dakota would develop treatments that saved not just their own children, but established a new kind of cooperation between peoples. When Father Miguel asked if anyone objected to the union, the canyon remained silent except for the whisper of wind through ancient stone. "Then by the power vested in me by God and the territorial authority, I pronounce you husband and wife," the priest concluded. As Dakota and Elena kissed for the first time, sealing their union between two worlds, even the former objectors found themselves hoping that this unusual couple might indeed build the bridge between peoples that everyone desperately needed. The ceremony was over, but Elena knew their real work was just beginning. The new moon hung invisible in the star-filled sky above Copper Springs, marking exactly 3 weeks since Ayanna had first warned Dakota about the approaching darkness. Elena stood at the window of their clinic, now serving as both medical practice and home to her unusual new family. Dakota sat beside Itzel's crib, gently stroking his daughter's hair as she slept peacefully. Their marriage was barely a week old, but it felt like they had been partners for years. They worked together naturally. Elena's medical training combined with Dakota's knowledge of Apache healing traditions had already proven more effective than either approach alone. Itzel was thriving, but more importantly, they had begun treating other sick children with remarkable success. "She's sleeping better than she has in months," Dakota observed quietly, not wanting to wake his daughter. "The blood condition is stabilizing," Elena agreed. "But I'm worried about the other children," Ayanna mentioned. "We've only been able to treat one Apache child and one settler child so far. The families are still afraid to cross cultural lines for help." Before Dakota could respond, frantic pounding erupted at their door. Elena hurried to answer it and found Mrs. Henderson, the schoolteacher, standing in the moonlight with terror written across her face. "Dr. Rodriguez, thank God you're awake," she gasped. "It's my nephew Billy. He collapsed an hour ago and he's burning up with fever." My sister is beside herself with worry. Elena was already reaching for her medical bag. "Bring him here immediately. I'll prepare the examination room." "There's more," Mrs. Henderson continued. 3 other children in town came down with the same symptoms today. And I heard from the Apache woman who trades at Morrison's store. She says 5 more children in their camp are sick too. Elena and Dakota exchanged alarmed glances. This was exactly what Ayanna had predicted. The mysterious illness was spreading rapidly through both communities. Within an hour, Elena's clinic had become a makeshift hospital. Parents from both Apache and settler families swallowed their prejudices and brought their fevering children for treatment. The waiting area overflowed with worried mothers and fathers who would normally never speak to each other, now united by their desperation to save their children. "I need more hands," Elena told Dakota as she prepared medicines for the 6th child that evening. "Can you ask Ayanna if any of the Apache women know healing arts? And see if Mrs. Henderson can find settler women willing to help with basic nursing care." Dakota nodded and slipped out into the night. Elena continued working, moving from child to child, checking temperatures and symptoms. What she found both encouraged and worried her. The children who received early treatment were responding well, but those who had been sick longer were much worse off. Young Billy Henderson was the most concerning case. His fever had spiked dangerously high and he was having trouble breathing. Elena recognized the signs. Without immediate intervention, the boy would not survive until morning. As she prepared a stronger dose of medicine, she heard horses approaching. Through the window, she saw Dakota returning with Ayanna and 3 other Apache women. Behind them rode a group that made Elena's heart sink, Nalnish and several of his warriors, their faces grim in the moonlight. Dakota entered first, followed by the Apache women who immediately began examining the sick children with practiced eyes. Ayanna moved from bed to bed, speaking softly to each child and occasionally murmuring prayers in the old language. "The darkness I saw in my vision," Ayanna said to Elena. "This sickness is part of it, but not all of it. There is something else coming, something that will test everything you and Dakota have built together." Before Elena could ask what she meant, Nalnish strode through the door with his warriors. But instead of the anger she expected to see, Elena saw something much more frightening: genuine fear. "My son," Nalnish said, his voice breaking slightly, "Little Wolf is dying. Nothing we have done helps him." For the first time since Elena had known him, the proud Apache warrior looked completely vulnerable. Dakota stepped forward and placed a hand on his cousin's shoulder. "Bring him here," Dakota said simply. "Elena can help him." "I spoke against your marriage," Nalnish admitted, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I called it betrayal and dishonor. But if there is any chance your wife can save my son—" "There is," Elena assured him. "But you need to understand the treatment takes time and he'll need to stay here for several days. You'll have to trust us completely." Nalnish nodded without hesitation. Pride meant nothing when his child's life was at stake. As more families arrived throughout the night, Elena realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Apache and settler children were lying in beds side by side, being cared for by women from both cultures working together. The clinic had become a place where the old division simply didn't matter. But just as Elena began to feel hopeful about their progress, a new crisis emerged. Dr. Whitman burst through the door, his face pale with exhaustion and fear. "Elena, we've got a bigger problem," he announced. "I just came from the Morrison Ranch. Pete's entire family is down with some kind of plague. Not the blood sickness the children have, but something else. High fever, difficulty breathing, and strange red spots on their skin." Elena felt her blood turn cold. "How many people?" "7 so far, and it's spreading to other families. This is different from what we've been treating. It looks like something I've read about but hoped never to see. A disease that can kill entire communities if it's not stopped quickly." Ayanna looked up from the child she was tending. "This is the true darkness I saw," she said quietly. "The blood sickness in the children was just the beginning. It brought our peoples together. But now comes the real test. A plague that will require everyone to work as one, or everyone will die." Through the window, Elena could see torches moving through the town as people spread word of the new outbreak. Some families were already packing wagons to flee, while others were barricading themselves in their homes. The fragile cooperation they had built around treating the children was about to collapse under the weight of genuine terror. "How do we stop it?" Dakota asked. "We don't just stop it," Elena replied, her mind racing through everything she knew about infectious diseases. "We have to convince 2 communities that have spent generations hating each other to trust us with their lives. We need Apache knowledge of desert plants that might fight infection, settler supplies of clean water and soap, and everyone working together to quarantine the sick while caring for the healthy." She looked around at the mixed group of Apache and settler families in her clinic, enemies, who had become allies in the space of a few hours, because their children needed help. "If we can do this," she continued, "if we can save both communities from this plague, we won't just be building a bridge between worlds. We'll be proving that cooperation isn't just nice idealism. It's the difference between life and death." Ayanna nodded approvingly. "The spirits chose well when they brought you 2 together. Now we will see if the prophecy of healing can overcome the prophecy of destruction." Outside, the sounds of panic were growing louder. Elena knew that by morning they would either be leading a united effort to save everyone, or watching both communities tear themselves apart in fear and blame. The real test was just beginning. Dawn broke over Copper Springs with the pale light of hope after the darkest night anyone could remember. Elena stood outside her clinic, watching the sun paint the desert mountains gold. and marveled at how much the world had changed in just 24 hours. The plague had indeed spread rapidly through both communities, but instead of tearing them apart, it had forged them into something entirely new. When faced with the choice between cooperation and death, people had chosen to live together. Behind her, the clinic buzzed with quiet activity. Apache women worked alongside settler wives, preparing medicines according to recipes that combined traditional desert remedies with modern medical knowledge. Children from both cultures played together while recovering from their illnesses, their laughter a sweet sound after so much worry and fear. Dakota emerged from the clinic carrying Itzel, who had become the unofficial mascot of their unusual hospital. The baby was completely healthy now, her blood condition fully stabilized, but more importantly, she had become a symbol of what was possible when two worlds merged with love instead of hatred. "How are the Morrison family doing?" Elena asked, taking her daughter into her arms. "Pete's fever broke an hour ago," Dakota reported. "His wife is sitting up and asking for food. I think we've turned the corner with the worst cases." Elena smiled, feeling exhaustion and relief wash over her in equal measures. "And Nalnish's son? Little Wolf is playing with the other children," Dakota said. "His father can't stop thanking us. I think he's finally understanding what Ayana meant about building bridges." As if summoned by his name, Nalnish appeared around the corner of the building, but he looked nothing like the angry warrior who had opposed their marriage just days ago. His war paint was gone, replaced by simple clothing suitable for the manual labor he had been doing to help set up additional patient beds. "Cousin," he said to Dakota, then turned respectfully to Elena. "Sister." The word carried weight. This was the first time he had acknowledged her as family. "The Apache Council has asked me to speak for them," Nalnish continued. "We want to propose a permanent arrangement with the town of Copper Springs." Elena raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What kind of arrangement?" "A shared community," Nalnish explained. "Apache families who want to learn farming and trading, working alongside settler families who want to learn about desert survival and traditional healing. Children from both groups attending the same school, learning both languages and both ways of life." The proposal was more radical than anything Elena had imagined, but as she looked around at the mixed groups of people working together naturally, it seemed not just possible but inevitable. Mayor Campbell approached from the direction of town, looking haggard but determined. Elena had expected him to oppose any expansion of Apache settler cooperation, but his expression suggested otherwise. "Dr. Rodriguez," he said formally, then nodded to Dakota. "I owe you both an apology and a debt of gratitude. Your marriage may have saved every life in this town. We all saved each other," Elena replied diplomatically. "Maybe so, but it started with your courage," the mayor insisted. "The town council met this morning, and we want to make you our official head of medical services for the entire region, Apache and settler communities both." Elena felt Dakota's hand take hers, squeezing gently. This was more recognition than she had ever dreamed possible. "There's something else," Mayor Campbell continued. "The territorial governor heard about what happened here. He's sending a delegation next month to study our Copper Springs model of community cooperation. Seems other frontier towns are having similar problems with disease and conflict." As the morning progressed, Elena found herself constantly amazed by the changes she witnessed. Apache children were learning to write English letters, while settler children learned to identify medicinal desert plants. Women from both cultures shared recipes and child-rearing techniques. Men discussed farming methods and hunting strategies as equals rather than enemies. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation was in Ayana. The elderly medicine woman seemed to have shed years of age overnight. She moved through the mixed community like a grandmother welcoming all her grandchildren, her prophecy of unity finally fulfilled. "You did it," Elena said when she found a quiet moment to speak with Ayana alone. "We all did it," Ayana corrected gently. "But yes, the darkness I saw has been pushed back. Not forever. There will always be those who choose fear over love, hatred over understanding. But for now, for this generation, we have shown a different path is possible." She looked over at Dakota, who was teaching a group of settler boys how to track animals in the desert sand. That young man was willing to risk everything for his daughter's future. You were willing to risk everything for healing strangers. Together, you created something neither could have achieved alone. As the day continued, Elena began to understand the full scope of what they had accomplished. The medical crisis had been just the catalyst. The real achievement was proof that different cultures could not only coexist, but could strengthen each other through cooperation. Father Miguel arrived in the afternoon to bless the new community arrangement. He had performed dozens of mixed-culture marriages over his 40 years of service, but he said he had never seen one produce such widespread positive change. Sometimes, God works through individual hearts to heal entire communities. He observed while watching Apache and settler families, sharing an evening meal together. You two opened the door and love walked through to transform everything. That evening, as Elena and Dakota settled their growing family for sleep, they reflected on the whirlwind of change that had brought them together. Itzel babbled happily in her crib, completely unaware that she had been at the center of a transformation that would echo through generations. "Do you think it will last?" Elena asked, watching her daughter play with a rattle that had been carved by Apache hands and painted with designs taught by settler women. "Nothing lasts forever," Dakota replied honestly, "but we've planted seeds that will keep growing long after we're gone. Children like Itzel will grow up seeing cooperation as normal, not exceptional. They'll raise their own children to build bridges instead of walls." Through their window, they could see Apache and settler families walking together under the stars, planning tomorrow's work, sharing stories, building friendships that would have been impossible just weeks ago. Elena thought about the prophecy that had started it all. Ayana's warning that Dakota must marry someone from the other world or watch his baby die. What had seemed like an ultimatum had actually been an invitation to create something beautiful and lasting. "The night did close in," Elena said softly, remembering the elders' original words. "But instead of bringing darkness, it brought us together." Dakota smiled and pulled her closer. "And now every dawn belongs to all of us." In her crib, Itzel drifted off to sleep surrounded by the gentle sounds of a community at peace. Apache lullabies mixing with Spanish prayers, English conversations blending with the ancient wisdom of the desert wind. She was the first child of a new world, where the best of all traditions would help her grow strong and proud. The bridge between worlds was complete, and it would hold for generations to come.